Good morning from the tiny room. We're
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
so Bruce left the house this morning. I drove the truck this morning because I'm picking up building materials for the master bedroom and
Ooh,
don't have the office keys on the truck key ring, so felt really good about the way things were going this morning. Got up early. I mean, real early, like 4:07. I had to get out, feed the donkey, make sure he had water because everything's just rock
you're
hard
still
ice.
feeding the donkey,
We have to feed the donkey in the winter. Yeah. And
which is not their donkey.
well, it's ours
It's-
now. We got it with the farm. It's going to
you
cost
were
us.
you were bequeathed an ass.
Yes, it seems that this ass is going to cost us right at $60 a month because I had to buy feed hay and sweet feed this week for the donkey.
My God.
So we're canceling our Netflix subscription, YouTube subscription, just
Trading it for a donkey.
so we can feed. Nice. Tell them we're busy right now. This is going to be a day, people. This is going to be no ordinary day.
Oh my goodness. Could
Yeah,
that be a segue
that
about this day?
today's song is Ordinary Man by Ozzy Osbourne featuring Elton John.
Yes.
And by the way, if you haven't heard the song, you need to listen to it. It's a great.
Pause now, go listen to the song Ordinary
It's a
Man.
great song in some ways and not so much in some other ways, which we'll talk about on the podcast today. Um,
Because this is our new vibe going into this year, we
right?
decided we are going to build our unscripted conversation around one chosen song. By the way, we've already had a listener send in a couple of songs, possibly that we're going to pick one of those for next
For next
week.
week.
Not going to tell you yet what it is, but you keep sending those
I
in.
wonder if we should tell them a week ahead of time so they can comment on it while we're meeting.
Eh,
It's just crazy.
yeah, let's right. We can think about that.
Why
Yeah.
did you give me such a short chair? I look so much shorter than you today. This is not, I don't like, I like to be superior to Roger.
It is true. Can I get you? I can get you a pillow that will make
So,
you higher.
so once upon a time, Roger, there was a king who was only 12 inches tall. It was a terrible king, but a great ruler. I just, I saw that on
Please,
Facebook
that's
the other
not.
day. It just cracked me up.
Let's stop with the dad
It's the dad jokes
joke.
on the dock, those guys. Do you know who they got to do the dock with in this time?
Nate?
No, no, even better. Kevin Bacon.
Oh, really?
So these guys have made a YouTube channel, and they had Kevin Bacon on, sipping the coffee, trying not to laugh, and oh Lord, it was good. I just love their stuff. It's fun. It's I don't know, dad jokes on a dock, something like that. But that's not what we're here to talk about.
It is not.
We're here to talk about how the master bedroom's coming. Got the wall framed
Mr.
in,
Construction Man.
got the closet framed in now. So,
You got the ants cleaned out.
well, there was this. I've never seen this before. So on the front wall of the house, when we were kids, you'd buy that little ant farm that had two panes of glass, and then they would take the dirt and they would make little rows and furrows and just little squiggly things.
Because
And
that's what
it's
they
an ant
do.
farm. Well, that's what they do at a house. If there's a small opening, they carry dirt up into the house, and they built this farm on the outside facing of the insulation. So between the drywall and the actual insulation, there's just that facing. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm pulling off drywall, and it's an ant. There's no ants. The ants are all gone. They're dead. I mean,
Oh,
there's
there were
nothing.
no ants
No,
there.
zero ants.
Ah,
No, if there had been ants, we'd have seen some kind of, I'm sure, activity. The 7 degrees last year might have got them. I don't know.
that is fun.
So, but Roger, truckloads of dirt that they built up, 8 feet tall. So it went all the way up. Just it's a
Truckload
ants.
sounds extreme.
Okay, it was a
Little dump truck.
it was a cup of dirt. But anyway, it was dirt
It was
enough.
very impressive to you. That's what's important.
It was. So, Ordinary Man, Elton John, as most of you know, I shared this at Dad's funeral, but that was the last song I played for Dad before he passed. And I told Dad, because I'm not sure I'm not, I, he
Dad
could,
was not a big Ozzy
he
fan.
was not a big Ozzy Osbourne fan, but, and he could tell, he was trying to interact with me. we're just making guttural sounds,
Which is
but which might have been, please don't do it.
no, no, Ozzy.
No, honestly, I don't want that to be the last thing I hear before I go to heaven. And then I'll stand before God and say, okay, Raj.
What were you listening to Black Sabbath? Was that necessary?
Ozzy Osbourne and Elton John,
Was that
seriously?
edifying?
Was that edifying? Which is Dad's
That was our
classic
dad's
question
word.
about
I
any
don't,
song that he
I
didn't
don't
like.
think that's very edifying.
Well, Dad, that's because it's a rock song.
Yes, I don't think any Black Sabbath song would have been Dad thinking it was edifying.
No, but what's interesting, first I wanted to talk about it musically. So what I loved first about it was just enjoyed the lyric. It's a haunting song. But then the more I listen to it, I love the music. Starts with piano, then there's an orchestra, then they have a choir doing backup that's going lilting little ha 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 just in the
Yeah,
background. And then at the end, the orchestra and the strings, because it's what he's doing when you if you watch the video, he's sitting in an empty theater, like all red seats, and he's watching a video of his life. So there's all these clips, a lot of them black and white, of his
right.
life.
So it's a older
Yeah,
Ozzy watching
young Ozzy on
these
stage.
video clips and still photos from his family and concerts and things. Yes.
So it's kind of interesting, but musically, I got to where I really just like the music. But it finishes with this very, very. It's almost like an end of life sound. Dun
Yeah.
dun dun, and it just resolves with this very, it's clearly the end. Anyway, the whole idea of the song.
Well, hold on. Look at.
Go ahead.
Well, I want to stay on the musical part for this
Yeah.
question, just because. So, um, Bruce and I listen to a lot of similar music, but then there are places where we diverge, and Black Sabbath would have been one of those.
I never
Uh,
had the album Black Sabbath.
but so I like I don't know any Black Sabbath songs. I mean,
Okay.
there's not. I looked up this morning like what their most famous song, but I don't know anything. So I'm assuming this is not their typical sound.
Right. This is just him solo artist.
Right.
And he's done several solo things.
So this is doing solo, which in this case he does with Elton John.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So musically, it's very, very different than typical Ozzy sound, is what
Yeah.
I,
And I
which is what I assumed.
and I've only started listening to Ozzy Osbourne. So it's interesting. I didn't listen to him at all in high school when he was big.
Okay.
But I've been listening to him more now because he did another song that I really like. Very similar haunting sound called Mama, I'm Coming Home. So, and it
Really?
seems like when he says Mama, he's talking about his wife.
Okay.
And he talks about being on the road and Mama, I'm coming home. But he also talks in this song about I've made Mama cry.
Yes.
It's so when at first I think, did his mother cry? And I'm like, no, I think it's his wife that he's talking about in both of those songs. You could probably look that up and find out for sure.
Here, like, so here's my, so having said all that, like, this is not a song I knew about. It's one of the fun parts of
Yeah.
doing these musical. Um, I think a couple months ago you had played the song for me out of the conversation you'd had with Dad and said, "There's the song I played with Dad," and it took him out. Uh,
Right
you,
then, it happened
you
instantly.
you should know the song that Bruce actually was with Dad when he crossed Jordan.
It was an end of life request. And did you say across Jordan?
I did say suddenly that felt
Beulah Land on the other side of the Jordan River. That's where it is, folks.
where we'll fly away.
One day I'll fly away.
So
But
I
I only heard about the song a year before that because Zach put me onto it. So my son put me
isn't
onto it,
okay.
which was and I was like, oh, that's a cool song. I like it.
So I'm super curious
Yeah,
when he says, "I did this all for you."
yeah.
Who do you think the you
Oh,
is? This is
I
very,
I think
very
he's singing to the fans
okay.
the whole time.
Did this all for you. Then there's one because part of what I was wondering is it his wife?
Uh-huh.
I look at that video and she comes in prominently at different places
Interesting. Yeah.
and or for his family, there's the kids and there's this
The Osbourne kids.
where I did this for I was just the question kept coming up. I wonder who. So your feel is
It was the
I did
fans.
this for you.
But now, but that changes the nature of the song. If it was written just to his wife and family, oh, I did this all for you, because he starts the first song, the first line is, "I was unprepared for fame, then everyone knew my name. No more lonely nights.
Yep.
It's all for you." Now, and again, I'm just thinking, this is the fans. He's on stage every night. He's got people. No more lonely nights. He's
Yep.
on stage.
Yep.
Um, and then later he says, "I made Mama cry." So if Mama was his wife, he might have said, "No, I made you cry." I don't know.
And there's why I didn't know that
That
mom.
donkey looks like Molly. Sorry, I had an ADD moment.
No, the yeah. Of course, I was not aware that Mama was a reference, or could be one that he
Potentially a
used
reference.
for of his wife. So when I saw it, I was like, "Oh yeah, I made my mom cry more than once."
Oh yeah.
It shouldn't even been alive. There's this line in there. Um,
And that's in the video where it shows him in the hospital. He's overdosed. He was a notorious sex, drugs, and rock and roll guy. So he was that whole genre, overdoses, which is interesting. It's funny when we think about musicians, because we've had this talk before, but we're having it with our friends now. How many great musicians drank themselves to death, died early, overdosed on something? And I'm talking like major stars. Like you were the one that told me about Hank Williams Jr. No,
yeah,
Hank
Hank Williams,
Williams. More number one hits
Michael
than
Jackson,
anybody.
Prince,
Elvis.
Elvis. I mean, the stories, and then even within so many groups, um, Boston. There's an
Yeah,
artist.
yeah. One of
There's
the art. Yeah.
someone tormented with questions and how you're handling. Quite honestly, everyone knowing your name, you're not an ordinary man in that sense. You are, and where a certain weight comes on with that,
Hmm.
where you've got to now, yeah, be someone that you've got to prove something, or you've got to stay on top. You've got to keep
Oh yeah.
your fans love you, but the sense, and even in this song, he talks about a time when the stage will be empty, when the
When the
maybe
lights
my
go
most
down.
poignant line, when the
Yeah.
lights go down.
It's
What's
just
the
an
line? So
it's just, wait, is it don't forget me as the colors fade.
as the colors
When the
fade,
lights go down, it's just an empty stage.
see, don't forget me. That this is what
Yep.
I wonder if a lot of artists, and not just artists, we know about writers, sports athletes, this I'm in this moment, the spotlights, I'm in there, but almost this knowing I'm going to be forgotten. The fades, there's going to be a point where I'm no longer, right now I'm a star, I'm a superstar,
Yep.
but the lights are going to fade. Don't
And
forget
and
me.
you could also you can almost it's the haunting part of the song where he's getting it's like end of life makes you think about how did I live my life? And maybe he's wondering, did I live an ordinary life? Well, he led a disordinary life. I'm not just an extraordinary life yet, because I want to talk about what I would call an extraordinary life. A disordinary life in terms of he had a lot of the stuff that people think we want, myself included. Fame. Everybody knows your name. But then the weight of that. So when you watch, so several weeks ago, Marlene and I watched the Elton John documentary,
Yep.
which was his farewell tour, which was a 5 year farewell. The pandemic made part of it a 5 year farewell tour. But the largest, up until Taylor Swift, the largest number of people attending any tour series
Hmm.
up until Taylor Swift's last year, was the number one. So here's this artist that's 100 years old, 70 something, and he tours, and it's got at the time the largest audience of anyone in the world.
That's great.
So, and Elton John does the second part of the song again, which is why I'm thinking it's for the fans. Because now Elton John's singing, whether he's singing to his family, I don't know. But he goes, many times I've lost control, tried to kill my rock and roll. Just remember, it's all for you. Then he goes, I don't want to say goodbye. When I do, you'll be all right. After all, I did it all for you. So again, I'm thinking that he's singing to the fans again.
Well, it does what does
Because
resonate.
the music from both men will go beyond their life.
what does fit that is him saying, "Don't forget me."
Yeah,
That's not something it seemed you'd say to your family,
right.
but
Good point.
the fans, yeah, I could,
Don't forget me.
yeah,
Yeah, it's that whole thing of, yeah. So it made me think, all right,
because we forget ordinary people.
yeah.
That I anyway, yeah.
Well, so this goes to the question of, this is like the meaning of life question. What's the meaning? What everybody at some level, there's a quote that I use a lot in men's groups, and I can't even remember the quote's attributed to, but it says, "All men die, very few men really live."
Hmm.
And I've always liked that quote, and it's not. My take on that quote is probably different than the way some people would take it. Because when I look at my life, I'm like, I do think I've really lived on multiple fronts. But I did want to talk about, but what makes a life extraordinary? In other words, if the fear from both of these artists is, don't forget me. I had this very ordinary life, well, on planet Earth, but I'm going to be gone at some point. The whole idea of don't forget me. What what really defines a extraordinary life?
Well, I want to blow up the question, maybe.
All right.
I don't want to ruin the question. So, can I put a pin in it, whatever that means?
Oh, we call it put it in the parking lot.
Okay.
Put it in the parking lot over here.
All right. Just you can leave the car running, but
Okay. I've been relegated to the parking lot
no.
because Roger wants to blow up the question.
What listening to the song and then somehow God taking me to Isaiah 53
Mm,
this morning, I realized what is fascinating is the fact that Jesus was an ordinary man. He was fine with that. Isaiah 53, he was an ordinary man. He nothing
nothing about him
nothing you'd look
stood out.
that stood out. And it's funny, even Philippians 2 seems to suggest that part of God entering our world, he was fine with being ordinary. Didn't have to be God.
Well,
Didn't have to be seen as God. Wasn't grasping onto like being famous, being recognized.
Roger's interesting. You said something. He didn't grasp divinity
Right.
and he didn't grasp humanity in the sense that I have to have the crowds, the fame. In fact,
Good.
Marlene and I were reading this morning. He kept dismissing the crowds.
Yes.
Don't tell anyone that you saw this. Don't tell anyone. Certain times he would say, "Go and tell everyone what I've done," but then other times he's like, "No, don't. It's not time." He certainly was not about celebrityism.
No. So you're right. So it seemed almost like when the crowds were getting really big, this is a time for a super controversial teaching.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part with me. And they're like, "Yeah, we're out."
And a whole bunch just
4,988
walked out of the auditorium.
Yes. The lights went down, empty stage.
It was they for, but so this idea, even it didn't seem to be a striking person physically.
Yep.
Whether we want to see this tall, dark, handsome, long, flowing hair and
Like the guy on The Chosen.
right.
Good looking guy.
No, exactly. Is that maybe
Very winsome.
the problem with the casting there is he maybe wasn't ordinary enough. So it just struck me.
Hmm.
It struck me that as humans, almost all of us we want to be unordinary. We've got to set ourselves apart. We want to be
Special.
seen, recognized, special. Love that word. And the most amazing, unique, unordinary person who's ever walked the planet was unconcerned with being seen as ordinary. Would even less than ordinary, he dies a criminal. I mean, the last image people have of him, you think about this is what
Yep.
he is being executed with criminal. I mean, he's a criminal that's being executed. That's how his life ends. And
it's interesting. Some of the people in his own hometown were really a little bit angry at him. I mean, he's because they're like,
he's more than a little bit.
He's too ordinary. Isn't this
Yes.
Joseph's son? Isn't
Yes.
this the carpenter's son? Where did he get all this teaching? I mean, are you guys really buying into this? I mean, like, he's just an ordinary guy.
That's a great, I love that. That is great. This was, and this tells you
Mm.
he came to be an ordinary man.
Hmm.
I mean, he literally,
And
and that's what people said about it. In fact, that's can any good thing come out of Nazareth? That
right.
if there's ever an ordinary or
Well, that's actually less than
less
ordinary.
than ordinary,
Right.
right? Like
You don't make average
a
when you're coming out of
God-forsaken kind
Nazareth.
of place.
Yeah.
Like who even knows about? And all of this suggests, and I wonder if this is part of the call and the beauty of Jesus, which can allow me not to feel like I don't want to die an ordinary. I don't want to die forgotten. I don't want to die without having left a mark. I don't want to. It seems to me that Jesus gives me the ability to being fine with being an ordinary man. Now, I think it's a great question to talk about what makes anybody extraordinary. And so
Hmm.
I don't want to, it's not
No,
intending
I'm
to
not
blow up
saying
that
anything else the
question,
rest of the podcast.
but I was just thinking it is Jesus that gives me the freedom. I can remember earliest days of my past, but I had many other moments wanting to be discovered.
Oh yeah.
I think I've talked about one time
Yep.
where I sent into Christianity Today a tape of one of my messages because they would do these, they would send out these every month. They'd have three sermons from three, and
Yeah.
it could be people, uh,
Ordinary pastors.
but also some unor. There were, the Bill Hybels and
Uh-huh.
the Lee Strobels and
Right.
the uh, Joe Stolls and all these other. So, but again, there was some average, ordinary. So I sent in one of my messages, but I realized this was I wanted to be discovered, and it hit me something back. There were a number of years where I
Yeah.
was wanting to be discovered. That has changed in a wonderful way, but
Roger doesn't want anyone to know him at all.
a cynic could say, "Well, you just got used to the fact that there was nothing to discover."
You are undiscoverable.
Right. So it was eventually somebody it's just accepting reality, Roger. But what now? It is Jesus the ordinary that has freed me up from I don't I don't have to leave a mark. I don't have to be seen a particular way. I less than any point in my life at age 63 have to control whether you are impressed by me or not. I'm not saying that doesn't matter, that matters zero. I'm not saying that I have never ever, but for the most of my life, that's just, I'm okay with that. And so even I do a little morning video, like it doesn't matter to me any, like how many people are watching that or even what we're doing here. I mean, I'd love for our conversations quirky and to be maybe helpful or even just bring joy and laughter sometimes to people, but maybe
and
they do, maybe they
and
don't.
and less pain to our wives. That would be helpful, I think. No, I think, and now here's the I'm gonna jump in with a little difference in personality because I am different than you on that.
Yes.
It's always been very important to me to make an impact, to make a difference, and some of it's just wiring. I mean, when I look back at the early, so when I began following Jesus, age 25, the first couple of books I read were books on George Mueller, D.L. Moody, Charles Spurgeon. And the reason I read some of those books was because of even our grandfather, very, very well known in
Yep.
the fundamentalism world. And so I always had this sense that I was supposed to do something more. Now, I don't think that was necessarily accurate, but I always had that sense. But even since then, I've always wanted to make a difference. I mean, I still to this day want to make a difference. When I as I'm only 60, I'm going into this what our dad called the fourth quarter now, I want to make an impact. I want to make a difference. I want to, but that's why what makes an extraordinary life then is different for me now. Because like you, I wanted to be early on, wanted to be discovered. We wanted to be, I shouldn't say wait, I'm going to tell my story. Yeah, I wanted to be the next, Rick Warren, you know,
Yep.
you leading a mega church and writing a mega million, selling book and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, now that I know about all the scrutiny that comes with that and all the the haters that comes with that and the trollers and everything else. I'm like, yeah, I don't think I could even manage any of that. But I was struck as I was driving in this morning. I wish, and Ozzy Osbourne knew, and Elton John knew, and maybe they had a piece of this. Jesus said, "The greatest among you be the servant of all." And that's the most interesting, the line that struck me the most is, after all, I did this all for you, except I'm singing that song back to God. This is, I've
Right.
always loved that even song. Oh, it's a Bryan Adams song, but it talked about why I lived my life the way I did.
Okay.
You know, he said, I'd lived and lied for you. I would do anything for you.
Oh, got
I
you.
would do anything for you.
Yep.
But and it's not, and I don't want people to misunderstand. It's not that I feel like I have to work for God. The beautiful thing about this season of my life is I believe I get to work with God. I think He's inviting me into stuff all the time. It's just super fun. The I wrote a blog this year already, which
Good for you.
good for me. I had to speak of it, asked for one, last year, and that was on the schedule, so I wrote it. But one of the things I wrote in there that they quoted was, because the blog post was about together, and it was really more about me and Marlena wanting to be together this year and
Hmm.
do things together and do ministry together. But I said, it might be that God's calling others to do something together, a collaboration on a song like Ozzy Osbourne, Elton John,
Yep.
collaboration on a podcast, a collaboration on a book project. It might be that God's calling you to get together with friends more, to vacation together, to be more intentional about playing cards together, whatever that is. I said, or it might just be God inviting you to join him in his work and say, let's do this together versus doing it on your own. And I feel like I'm in that space in my life where you talk about where you are in your life now. I'm not doing things for God. I'm doing things with God.
Yeah.
And it's great fun. In other words, it's
It is.
amazing that he even wants to work
Yep.
with me because I am an ordinary man. But I believe that God gives me the opportunity to live an extraordinary life because I'm doing life with him. I told Marlena again, I might have said this on this podcast, but years ago when I did a teaching on Enoch, yeah, Old Testament guy, Genesis. What I loved about the story, the more I thought about it, it just said he walked with God and was no more. Like it didn't tell us for God had taken him. It didn't say anything about what he achieved.
Right.
He didn't say he built this thing, he was the king over this thing, he was the leader of this tribe, it told you nothing about him except the most extraordinary thing that the biblical author wanted you to know. He walked with God.
Right.
That's the extraordinary life.
That's what he. But here's the thing, and here's what I like. There's nothing more ordinary than walking. I mean, he's.
Oh, that's a good point. There's nothing more ordinary. Yeah.
In other words,
Just walking.
right. It isn't impressive. Where I'm exactly like you, and that is the sense, and this is the nuance is, oh, I'm very keen on making a difference.
Oh,
Like the single most important thing compliment you can give me is you said something
Mm.
that helped me think about my marriage differently. You said something that freed me up in my walk with Jesus. So making a difference, but for me, the distinction is different between making a difference and making a name.
Good point.
And this is sometimes what I think the burden of musical artists, but also even our listeners, just ordinary people, is feeling that I don't want to be forgotten. I've got to leave a mark. And my feeling is not so much I need to be remembered by people. I want to make a difference.
Yeah.
But the beauty now is I'm much more comfortable with I can make a difference and it's totally backstage
Yeah.
and one person knows it. That one person that I made a difference for. Or even fine with
Nobody knows.
where I'm praying for people.
Yeah.
I'm doing this thing. There's this way I'm serving. There's this thing that I'm doing, and no one. And this is part of where God has freed me from needing to be remembered in a certain way, seen in a certain way. I definitely want to make a difference, but I'm much more comfortable with the difference doesn't have to be known. And that was the line that I think for so many years I kind of put those together.
Yeah.
And
It-
yeah,
and here's the thing, according to Jesus, if you're serving others, I mean, because everything in life, in this world, the cosmos, the way of the world is self-serving. You take care of yourself. You take care of number one, speaking of you. But Jesus just flipped the whole thing. He said, no, serving others. That's the way to live your life. That's this extraordinary
Yep.
life. Of course, he referenced himself serving the entire world through his death, interestingly enough, that he in that moment served every person that would ever live, who had ever lived and who would ever
Yep.
live, served all of them. And even in dying. So that was the I realized even when you said making a name for yourself, that was a little convicting for me for a couple of reasons. I remember back in 2009 when I was first writing the book, they're like, you need to get a website. You got to get a website. And they're like, you need to use your name. Well, Bruce Martin was already gone. And so I chose Bruce W. Martin. And so on everything that I put out there, it's always Bruce W. Martin. Now, some of that was because I liked the way John R. Rice sounded. It
Okay.
wasn't just John Rice, very common name.
Our
John Rice,
granddad,
our
John
grandfather.
R. Rice. Yeah.
John R. Rice.
John R.
John R.
Bruce
John,
W.
yeah, it just doesn't work, does it? W is too long. But
It is
but
unfortunate.
part of that was to set it apart from all the other Bruce Martins. There's a bunch of I just got this friend suggestion yesterday from Bruce Martin, the guy at Temple College
Temple,
years
yes,
ago.
yes.
There's another Bruce
He,
Martin.
he
So
was
there was a part of
in
me,
choir with me.
this is
Yeah.
where I'm convicting myself right now, that wanted my name to be set apart. That's like, no, it's Bruce W. Martin. Some of that's practical because if you send an email to Bruce at brucemartin.com, it goes to a deceased contractor in Missouri. Seriously. Like their family sent me
I
a
have
note and said,
learned.
can you tell people to stop sending? And I'm like, I don't know when they're typing. I'm not there when they're typing in. So I do Bruce W. Martin and everything. But I realized part of that was making a name for myself. There's that desire, and it goes back to my desire to make a difference, make an impact. It's this. I'll never forget something that Mark Sandberg said that I never forgot. There's a couple of things that both Sandbergs said I never forgot. Well,
Our cousin.
Don Sandberg and Mark Sandberg. I didn't know Jim as well. But Mark said in one of our discussions, he said, Bruce, no one ever does anything with pure motives. We're human beings. We've always got mixed
Yes.
motives. And
Always
I'm
mixed.
like, that is absolutely true. I mean, as it's like the
It is.
blessed or the pure in heart. I'm like, man, I just don't have a shot at that title.
Right.
Because it's like I can't quite,
Right.
even when I do the most obscure thing, there's a part of me that's like, did someone get that on
Right.
social media that?
Right. No, there's always the pull and the but what matters to me for this is there's an angst in this song, and we've already hit it. I mean, artist after artist.
Yeah.
My son Ben and I were talking about another another musical documentary of a musician he put me onto. It's called Avicii, I'm Tim,
Okay.
which you should watch.
Okay.
I'd never heard, I thought I'd never heard
Avicii?
Avicii. Then I learned a couple of songs. Um, anyway, it's
Avicii, I'm Tim.
that's the name of the documentary, but
Interesting.
it's fascinating. Avicii, I'm Tim. Um, but it's the same story, and this that just so much this angst of there's something I'm trying to get. I've got all this acclaim. I've got all these people that love me, and that even becoming a weight. And I wonder if part of that weight is again wanting to be remembered, not wanting to be forgotten.
And is it a plea for his fan, if he's singing to fans, is it a plea from both men to validate their life?
Right.
I did it all for you.
Yes.
Doesn't that mean I did it all for you?
Right.
Doesn't that mean something?
Yeah.
Now,
Don't forget that.
don't
Yeah.
forget that. Even Elton John, you know, when I'm gone, you'll be all right. But
Yeah.
I don't want to have to say goodbye. But there's this whole thing, but there's a part of it. I'm looking for validation. Please tell me I lived an extraordinary life. I don't want to die an ordinary man.
Right. And this thing of not wanting to be forgotten, but maybe this gets at like that's one of the great lies maybe in is trying to go out on our own with the Bible paints this picture of just sort of the human story, like the God who made us, who will never forget us, who gave us our name, who gave us our claim to fame, he is our bright light, he is our fame, he is our when we're going off trying to make our own star, we're trying to go off and we did untether from the one who is our fame and our light, then I think there's this kind of desperate thing because we almost realize, like, yeah, people will forget. We actually in this kind of. I see you thinking, yeah.
Well, no, I was just thinking, not listening to you at all. No, I was thinking about the a Times photo book that we had years ago called A Pictorial History of Crime, and how many of those criminals are to this day well known, having movies done about them. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
Whitey Bulger, um,
yeah.
Babyface Nelson,
Bonnie and Clyde,
Bonnie and Clyde.
the
The
clock tower
most
shooter, the
I was just thinking about the clock tower
yeah,
shooter. This whole thing of even now you have more and more terrorists, mass shooting.
the Texas campus. Yeah, I
You,
think
you wonder how many of them are trying to make a name.
yes,
Even if you're going out in a blaze of inglory in
right.
that sense, killing others, taking life,
I don't want to forget even this.
because
Was it?
you'll never forget the name Jeffrey Dahmer.
I think there was. I don't know. Was it Nero? What you think about one? When I die,
You're right,
I'm going to make sure people remember because
because I'm
when
terrified.
I die, X number of people are going to be executed. Like this thing of the desperate lengths we end up getting
Going to be known.
to to not be forgotten, to be when the word got you're known, you're loved, you're valued, you're important, you're noticed, you're seen, and even if, like we're the Bible, even if your father and mother forsake you, even if they forget,
Yeah,
the prophet says, "Can a woman forget the child at her breast?" No, well, even less so will I
your heavenly Father, forget. Yeah,
forget you. Um, so just this for me, the answer to the ache that I have felt, but that I see so often in our world, in these songs, so often with artists, of God has freed me from the fear of being forgotten, even the fear of being just ordinary, of even the fear of just making ordinary impact.
yeah,
Because I think, and I think this was part of our upbringing because our granddad, by some measures, had extraordinary impact. I'm just talking about a lot of people knew his name. A lot of people, he would sometimes speak to thousands of people. And I think even hardwired somewhere into our family story was that you make a difference. If you're making a difference, it's big.
yeah,
And I think that's at some
yeah,
point what I had to. Jesus said, and you've talked about this often, a cup of water.
yeah.
You give someone a cup of water in my name.
Hmm.
Nobody else sees it but that person. You're just giving me a cup of. You won't.
You're
You're noticed. You're seen. God loves that. That is. It's ordinary, but it's extraordinary. I mean, it's in God's kingdom.
yeah.
Ordinary is extraordinary. Maybe that we might have I blew up your question about what makes someone extraordinary.
No, but I answered it in that. I think
Okay,
serving. I mean, in other
serving
words,
good,
just when you're
which is
serving
very
others,
ordinary.
right? If you give
Serving is
someone
very
you're
ordinary.
giving someone a cup of cold water. You're refreshing another person.
Yeah,
That is super ordinary, and yet
you're listening.
that's the key to the extraordinary life.
What if the most significant things we ever do look very ordinary? Things like listening. It always feels like so much more important to be talking.
Yeah,
But how often are we making an impact where we're ironically being unforgettable by listening,
yeah.
um, by just being there for somebody, by caring, by um, anyway.
One last thing before we
Yeah,
go that I thought about with that particular song. I thought about, and again, I can't judge the motivation here. I can only be an observation from the outside, particularly when I watch, because I've not watched an Ozzy Osbourne documentary, but I watched one on Elton John.
yes,
And Elton John talked about in his 20s, 26 years old, 1974, at the height of his fame, 110,000 people come to Dodger Stadium to hear him sing.
27.
He's 27. He's just crazy young. I was just thinking Zach's age, just Zach's age.
Right.
But he said my life was awful. He said I was doing all these drugs. He said the only thing what occupied my mind all the time was being I had to stay high on the charts. I had to stay high on the charts. I had to stay high on the charts. And what I thought
And I
about
just stay high on everything
and you're
else.
so high on everything else, which is one of those lines in the song, been
So,
higher than the blue sky. But I've
or
been
even Rocket Man,
oh yeah,
Rocket Man about being
yeah.
about him being
Gonna be a
high
long, long
all the
time
time.
till touchdown brings me around again to find.
Fine, yes.
But he talks honestly about his journey with drugs. But when they say I did it all for you, I'm like, but is that true? In other words, fame is something we do for ourselves. I mean, we do for ourselves. It's been the one thing, and I'm going to say this carefully. It's been the one thing that makes me most uncomfortable about building a platform.
Yep.
Like when you want to publish a book with a traditional publisher, they're like, you got to build your platform. What they mean is you got to get more and more followers. You've got to have more and more people that are listening to you. You have to have more and more people that are getting your emails. You have to have more and more people that are listening to your podcast. Thousands of people, but you're building that. I'm just like, everything about that just never sat.
It feels dicey,
It
yes.
feels dicey because there's that I did it all for you. I did it for the Lord. I did it for others. I did. But then how much it, because the whole mixed motives, no one does anything out of completely pure motives.
Right.
If you feel like you've got to stay up on the charts, is that for the fans or is
Right.
that for you?
Right.
I don't know. I can't answer that question.
But I think it is the great tension, these artists, because they're doing something they love.
Yeah. Or that they used to love.
And this is actually what's the crux. So many of them hit this point where when does what was something I loved and art I was producing now being controlled by a product
Yeah.
that now has to meet expectations, that has to make people. There's some point in the process. It almost always starts with the joy of writing and creating and whatever.
And now I've got to write 3 novels because I've got a contract.
Yes. And now I've got to, people love this series, and now the pressure is on when it moves from this joyful thing that's about creating art and
Even for pastors, when we do a series that we really like, oh, Bruce, I love the Matrix series. I mean, this one's okay, but man, that Matrix series, that one, you're like, it said that you feel like, well, I got to keep ramping it up.
no, and thing is, and then when you hit it, like you set a bar.
Yeah.
I think what the people from I set a new bar. Well, I've got to top that.
I've got to top that.
I've got to top that to stay
Unforgettable, current,
yes.
relevant.
Unforgotten. Yes.
Taylor Swift. Think about the pressure there.
Yep.
I mean, well, I've got to go. I've got a 9:30 meeting, and we're closing in on that right now. Frankly, my phone is telling me that anyway. So
we're taking a listener's request next week.
Next week,
a listener has given us 3 songs.
Give
to
us
consider.
the 3 choices that we have to choose from, Rod. And we'll go.
Don't remember.
Well, one of them like Super Barbie.
They
were very obscure songs, which I love.
Yes, let's see.
An obscure man, an obscure life.
Okay, here we go.
Here we go. These are our choices for next week.
Eclipse by Pink Floyd.
Eclipse.
Super Trooper by Super Chick.
Super Trooper by Super Chick.
Or Wise Up by Amy Mann. So we are going to. It's going to be one of those.
Roger
3.
gets to choose it. It's his week. So
all right,
but he's choosing it from a listener. So thank you, listener,
who's given us options. Thank you so much. That may be our only listener. I don't know.
We love you so
possibly.
much, Mr. One Listener. And Mom, who used to listen. Oh, she didn't. Mom never listened. Mom was not a fan. All right. We'll see you next week, probably. It's 50-50, really. We'll let you know. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to post last week's this week as well as this week's this week. Sorry for that. I don't even know
How do you turn this?
I don't know. I'm so far away from it.
We